What's interesting, I think, about all of this is that the stakes are high. And you actually come up with some examples in your New York Times piece. I believe you talk about Ukraine and the outcome of the Russian incursion into Crimea and how that outcome could have been different had there been more skilled diplomats from the Ukrainian side. So you talk about some of the real world examples of where amateurish diplomacy may have had a negative impact on outcomes.
So specifically, I was talking about the consequences for Russia as a result of the annexation of Crimea and the conflict in eastern Ukraine in terms of rallying the EU or rallying the West to impose maybe a tougher punishment on Russia than the sanctions that currently exist, that were imposed in 2014 and currently exist. But I gave that example because I've actually had Western diplomats at the very high level tell me that they just feel sorry for the Ukrainian government because they thought that, and I feel like I'm bad-mouthing a country behind its back or in front of cameras, but but that's not the purpose here. The purpose is to make countries realize that investment in diplomacy, investing in a professional foreign service, where you give people proper training when they come in and you keep giving them training at every level like the military does. And it's called professional development. You can't expect that because someone is a people person, they're good at negotiations. You cannot do that. And by the way, part of the skills that you asked about before, I said listening and speaking in private, it's also, and that is the most difficult and the most time-consuming part of all, that's why being in the diplomacy for a long time helps a lot. And that is knowing your interlocutor, knowing the other side. And that means knowing their country, their culture, their language, their history, their mentality, what they have, what the stakes are for them in that relationship or negotiation, whatever it is. And then finding a way to persuade them that what you want them to do is in their own interest. That's what it's about. And
that makes a lot of sense.
And if there's one word in diplomacy about what diplomacy is about, the word is influence, right? You may not be successful the first time. You may not get that country to do whatever you want them to do, but you've built some sort of relationship with the executive branch. Maybe the executive branch is hopeless. And I have an example of that in Uganda, if you want me to share it. Then you go and build a relationship with the legislative branch. Maybe they'll help you when you need something done in that country. But Uganda is a great example because the executive branch at the time was hopeless, and it was about the anti-gay law that they attempted to pass and actually passed, and then it got struck. And then, anyway, this was a few years ago, when the embassy, the American embassy, and of course the Obama administration wanted to see that law fail because it violated human rights. And they tried to work with the government. The embassy tried everything, at least they say they tried everything, and then just nothing happened. The government wouldn't budge. And finally, someone at the embassy said, well, we're going about this the wrong way. Forget the executive branch. What about the legislative? What about the parliament? Because that's where they're going to vote on this law, right? If we get enough members to vote no, then this law is not going to pass. Well, now, you don't do this such a thing on a national level, because I mean, the media was overwhelmingly in favor of that law. I mean, they were outing people on the front pages in Uganda, and newspapers. Even people who weren't gay, they were outing as gay. And those people got threats and actually were attacked. It was horrible to think that in the 21st century this would happen in any country. So the embassy then identified specific members of parliament in whose districts there were certain interests that they represented, including private interests, private sector interests. And again, they knew that these members of parliament wouldn't be voting against the law because the US wanted them to, right? It's just not, that wouldn't work in any country,
yeah.
right? This wouldn't necessarily work in an American-friendly country, let alone Uganda, right? And so they had to find interests that the members of parliament were representing in their own districts. So this is, I'm not going to tell you exactly what they did and how they did it, because I don't want to give away any secrets or give ideas to other countries to do certain things, because these techniques and tactics can be used for nefarious purposes,
sure.
as you can imagine. But suffice it to say that you can look at the district from where that member of parliament is coming from, and you can look at the interests, whether it's environmental, business, whatever it is, education, healthcare, and try to make an argument that would resonate
sure.
with. And in fact, they did. They found enough people to
Were
to
these
help.
foreign service or professionally trained diplomats?